I'm Derek. Welcome to Intertwined Hearts. Subscribe, like, and share if you enjoy. Let's go. The reflection in the private elevator mirror didn't lie. Logan Thorne was finished. The deep circles under his eyes and his slightly crooked tie betrayed the 72 hours he had spent awake, immersed in reports and conference calls. As CEO of Thorne Pharmaceuticals, he knew the price of success well, but on this particular morning, his body was paying huge interest. The elevator opened directly into his office on the top floor of the glass and steel building that dominated Park Avenue. The first thing he noticed was Harper Collins, his executive secretary, methodically organizing a stack of documents on her mahogany desk. She raised her green eyes and quickly assessed his condition. "Extra strong coffee and 2 aspirin are on the way," she said without waiting for him to ask. "And I canceled your 9 o'clock meeting with the Chinese investors." Logan loosened his tie and collapsed into his leather armchair. "Don't cancel. I can't show weakness, especially now." Harper crossed his arms, a stance few would dare assume in front of him. "With all due respect, sir, you look like you were hit by a truck. Twice." He almost smiled. Almost. That's what he'd appreciated most about Harper since hiring her 18 months ago. Her brutal honesty combined with impressive efficiency. At 32, she was probably the best executive secretary he ever had. "The meeting with the Chinese can wait," she continued. "But there's something you can't do." Harper slid an envelope across the table. "The results of your quarterly checkup are back from Dr. Martinez." The world seemed to freeze for an instant. Logan stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. His hands shook slightly as he picked it up, a reflex he hated but couldn't control. "Do you want me to leave?" Harper asked softly. "No." The answer came out quicker than he intended. "Stay." The official paper from the private hospital carried the same devastating words as always. Non-obstructive azoospermia, irreversible condition. Logan closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of defeat. "Sir?" Harper's voice brought him back. "Nothing has changed," he said, his voice hoarse. "Like always." The silence that followed was interrupted by the arrival of coffee. Harper poured a cup and placed the aspirin beside it. Logan watched her precise movements, noticing for the first time how particularly pale she looked that morning. "Harper, are you okay?" She hesitated, something rare in her always assured demeanor. "Actually, we need to talk about something." Logan checked his Rolex. "Can it wait until after lunch?" "It's about that night," she said softly, and Logan's world stopped for the second time that morning. 3 weeks ago, after a particularly difficult day and several shots of whiskey, they had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. A night of shared vulnerability, of mutual comfort, that they both silently agreed never to mention. "Harper, we agree. I am pregnant." The words hit Logan like a punch to the gut. "That's impossible," he said, standing up abruptly. "You know about my condition. If this is some kind of—" "I know about the Phoenix Project," she interrupted, her words loaded with meaning. Logan froze. Project Phoenix was one of Thorne Pharmaceuticals' best-kept secrets, an experimental treatment for male infertility that had been in development for years. "I've been working here for almost 2 years, sir. I have access to practically all the files, and I'm very good at putting the pieces together." Logan felt a mix of anger and fear. "What did you do?" Harper took a deep breath. "I found the preliminary report 6 months ago. The treatment was working in all the trials, but it was shelved because someone thought it wouldn't be profitable enough." "You self-administered an experimental treatment?" His voice rose dangerously. "No," she replied, remaining calm. "I changed your vitamin B12, the one you take every morning." Logan's blood ran cold. For months she had— "You had no right," he growled. "No, I didn't," Harper agreed, her voice shaking for the first time. "But I saw how it destroyed him inside. I saw the reports about his divorce, about how his ex-wife blamed him. I saw how each new negative result hurt him, and I had the solution right there." Logan staggered to the window, watching the city spread out below. His mind whirled between anger at the violation of his trust and a small, dangerous spark of hope. "How can I believe you?" he asked, without turning around. "How can I be sure this isn't an elaborate attempt to—" "From getting your money?" Harper added bitterly. "Take the test yourself. The treatment is still in your system, and in a few weeks we'll be able to do a DNA test." Logan finally turned to face her. Harper Collins, always so competent and in control, seemed vulnerable for the first time since he'd met her. But his green eyes held that familiar determination. "Why?" he asked simply. "Because you deserved a chance," she replied. "And because I care more than I should." The silence that followed was interrupted by the phone. Harper automatically moved to answer him, but Logan stopped her with a gesture. "Cancel all my appointments for today," he ordered. "We have a lot to discuss." As he watched Harper make the necessary calls, Logan felt the world spin on its axis. Within hours, her life had turned into a minefield of dangerous hopes and broken trusts. The woman before him was simultaneously his salvation and his possible destruction, and he had no idea which way to go. The private basement laboratory at Thorne Pharmaceuticals was silent when Logan inserted his access card. The fluorescent lights flashed automatically, revealing state-of-the-art equipment and a series of high-performance computers. He had dismissed Harper hours ago, but his mind was still filled with that morning's revelations. "Dr. Chen," Logan called, spotting the chief scientist hunched over a microscope. "I need you to run some tests, with absolute discretion." The middle-aged Asian scientist adjusted his glasses, surprised by the CEO's presence at that hour. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. What kind of tests?" Logan took a bottle of vitamins out of his pocket. "I want a full analysis of the contents, and I need you to examine these blood samples." He placed 2 test tubes on the bench, one labeled with his name and the other with the initials HC. "Looking for something specific?" Dr. Chen asked, his scientific curiosity evidently piqued. "The Phoenix Project," Logan replied, closely watching the scientist's reaction. "I want to know if there are traces of the treatment in these samples." Dr. Chen visibly paled. "Sir, that project was shelved a while ago." "I know exactly when it was archived," Logan interrupted. "What I need to know is whether someone could have accessed and modified the formula without authorization." While the scientist began the tests, Logan headed to his private room in the laboratory. It was a space he rarely used, preferring his penthouse office, but now he needed privacy to dig through the Phoenix Project files. The next few hours were a deep dive into technical reports and experimental data. Logan discovered that Harper had been meticulous in her research. The project actually demonstrated promising results before being shelved for financial reasons, a decision that now seemed absurdly short-sighted. His phone buzzed with a message from Harper. "I need to show you something. Can I come down?" Logan hesitated before answering in the affirmative. Minutes later, she entered the room carrying a thick folder and a flash drive. "I found this in the old files," Harper said, his professional voice masking any nervousness. "These are documented cases of success in preliminary testing that were deliberately omitted from the final report." Logan flipped through the documents, his heart racing with each page. "Who else knows about this?" "Just me," she replied, sitting in the opposite chair. "And now you." The silence that followed was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Chen, who seemed simultaneously fascinated and apprehensive. "Mr. Thorne, the preliminary results?" He paused, looking hesitantly at Harper. "She can hear," Logan authorized. "The treatment is present in both samples," the scientist continued. "But the most impressive thing is that the formulation has been modified. Perfected, I would say. Whoever did this managed to eliminate the side effects that we were originally concerned about." Logan fixed his gaze on Harper, who maintained her composure even under his intense scrutiny. "How?" he asked simply. "I spent 6 months studying the formula," she explained. "My father was a biochemist. He taught me a lot before he passed away. I realized that the problem was in the dosage of the main component. I adjusted the proportion and—" "You could have killed me," Logan interrupted, his voice thick with restrained emotion. I tested it thoroughly beforehand, Harper defended himself. I would never risk your life. She trailed off, biting her lip. I'm what? He pressed. Too important, she added softly. Dr. Chen cleared his throat, reminding them of his presence. Should I continue with the tests? Logan nodded, and the scientist discreetly withdrew. Being alone with Harper again, he allowed himself to really look at her. Not as his efficient secretary, but as the woman who had potentially changed his life forever. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked, his voice softer now. Harper stood up, walking to the window that looked into the laboratory. Because you would have said no. You would have followed the protocols, the proper procedures, and in the meantime, years would have passed, and you would have continued to suffer. So you decided for me. Yes. She turned to face him. And if it means I'm going to lose my job or face legal consequences, I'll take it. I have no regrets. Logan approached her, noticing how his proximity made her catch her breath. You're the most frustrating person I've ever met, he said, his voice low. And possibly the bravest. Mr. Thorne, she began, but he interrupted her. Logan. I guess after all this, you can call me Logan. A small smile appeared on her lips. Logan. She tested the name. What happens now? He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. Now we need to deal with the implications of all this. Legally, ethically. He paused. Personally. I understand if you want me to step away from the company, Harper offered. No. The answer was immediate. You stay. We need you. He trailed off, unsure of how to continue. The moment was interrupted by Dr. Chen's return with more results. While the scientist explained the technical details, Logan watched Harper from the corner of his eye. She had turned his world upside down, violated his trust, and possibly given him the greatest gift of his life. The question now was, how to balance gratitude with betrayal, and most importantly, how to deal with the growing feelings he had been trying to ignore since that night 3 weeks ago. The future was full of uncertainty, but one thing was clear. Nothing would be the same at Thorne Pharmaceuticals, or in the life of Logan Thorne. The days following the discoveries in the lab were a roller coaster of emotions for Logan. Sitting in his penthouse office, he watched Harper through the glass doors, analyzing her every move as if he could decipher all of her secrets just by looking. The final results are in, Dr. Chen announced, entering the office after a brief knock on the door. The scientist seemed even more agitated than usual, his glasses slipping down his nose as he held a thick folder. Logan gestured for Harper to enter as well, and she positioned herself discreetly in a corner of the room, notebook in hand as always, although everyone knew that her presence there had another meaning now. The modification that was made to the original formula is extraordinary, Dr. Chen continued, spreading charts across Logan's desk. Whoever did this managed to not only eliminate the side effects, but also increase the effectiveness by 47%. Logan shot a sharp look at Harper, who maintained her professional demeanor even though her hands clenched lightly on her notepad. What about the risks? Logan asked, his voice tense. Surprisingly low, Dr. Chen replied, adjusting his glasses. In fact, toxicity markers are practically non-existent. It's as if someone has... He hesitated, searching for the right words. Refined the formula to perfection. Impossible, Logan muttered, rising from his chair. Harper, how did you actually do that? Harper finally abandoned his professional pose, setting the pad aside. I told you. My father was a biochemist. No. Logan interrupted her, his voice sharp. I just checked your father's background. He was a high school chemistry teacher in Minnesota. Never worked in advanced research. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen looked nervously between the two before muttering something about checking some more data and practically fleeing the room. Logan, I can explain, Harper began, but he held up his hand, silencing her. No more lies, he said, his voice dangerously controlled. I want the truth. All of it. Now. Harper took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was a different determination in his gaze. My real name is Harper Winters, she began, and before I worked here, I was a lead researcher in the biotechnology division at Maxwell Pharmaceuticals. Logan felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Maxwell Pharmaceuticals was Thorne's main competitor, and 2 years ago it had suffered a scandal when important research data mysteriously disappeared. You're the scientist who stole the research, he said, realization hitting him like a wave. I didn't steal it, Harper protested, taking a step toward him. Saved it. They were going to bury the research, just like you did with the Phoenix Project. Discoveries that could help thousands of people, discarded because of profit projections. So you infiltrated my company, Logan concluded bitterly, using fake credentials. No, Harper responded quickly. Well, yes, but not for the reasons you're thinking. I came to Thorne because I knew you had the resources and technology I needed to perfect the formula. And then I found out about your condition, and everything changed. Logan approached her, his imposing presence making her step back until her back was against the wall. Why should I believe anything you say now? Because I'm pregnant with your child, she replied, her voice shaking slightly. Because I spent the last 2 years developing a cure that no one else could, and it worked. And because... She hesitated, biting her lip. Because I fell in love with you in the process, even though I knew I shouldn't. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and inevitable. Logan could smell her soft perfume, see the pulse quickening in her neck, notice the sparkle of tears contained in her eyes. Prove it, he said finally. Prove you're not lying about all this too. Harper reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Here is all my work, from the last 5 years, including what I did at Maxwell and everything I developed here. Every test, every modification, every failure and success. Logan took the device, his fingers brushing hers for a moment. Dr. Chen will look into all of this. I know, she nodded. And when he's done, he'll confirm that I'm telling the truth. About the research, about the treatment, about everything. What if he doesn't confirm? Then you can hand me over to the authorities, she replied simply. But Logan, regardless of what happens to me, you need to make sure this research isn't buried again. There are thousands of men like you who could benefit. Logan turned away from her, returning to his desk and pressing the intercom. Dr. Chen, I need you to analyze some data. Top priority. As they waited for the scientist to return, the silence between them was filled with unresolved tension. Harper remained where he was, as if afraid that any movement would shatter the fragile balance of the moment. Why didn't you come straight to me with the research? Logan finally asked. Because you would have followed corporate protocols, she replied. It would have taken years for us to implement anything. And honestly, I didn't trust you at first. I thought you were like other CEOs, only concerned with profit. And now? Now I know I was wrong, Harper said softly. You're different. That's why I fell in love with you. And that's why I hope you can forgive me eventually. Before Logan could respond, Dr. Chen returned to the room, and a new phase of this complicated story was about to begin. A phase that would determine not only the future of Thorne Pharmaceuticals, but also the fate of 3 lives intertwined by secrets, science, and unexpected love. The 20th floor boardroom of Thorne Pharmaceuticals was buzzing with the presence of the company's top executives. Logan watched through the glass windows as Dr. Chen prepared his presentation, meticulously organizing his notes on the mahogany desk. Harper was not present. Logan had instructed her to remain in her office, away from the board's inquisitive eyes. Over the past 3 days, since revealing his true identity, he had immersed himself in an exhaustive investigation into Harper Winters and her work at Maxwell Pharmaceuticals. Gentlemen, Logan began, his voice commanding immediate attention. What we are going to discuss today cannot leave this room. Dr. Chen projected the first slides onto the screen, showing comparative graphs between the original Project Phoenix formula and the modified version. The murmurs started immediately. As you can see, the scientist explained, the modifications made not only eliminated the toxicity issues that we were concerned about, but also significantly increased the effectiveness of the treatment. And you're saying a secretary did it? Asked Richard Montgomery, Chief Financial Officer, his skepticism evident. Dr. Harper Winters got this, Logan corrected, emphasizing the title. And she's not just a secretary. The revelation of Harper's true identity had the expected effect. The room erupted into heated arguments, with accusations of industrial espionage and demands for immediate legal action. Silence, Logan ordered, banging the table. Before you jump to conclusions, check this out. He distributed copies of a detailed report. Dr. Winters didn't steal research from Maxwell. She saved it from destruction. And most importantly, she perfected it here, using our resources, benefiting our company. And, coincidentally, you're personally involved with her. Montgomery commented tartly. Logan stared at the CFO coldly. My personal involvement with Dr. Winters is irrelevant to this discussion. What matters are the results. Dr. Chen cleared his throat nervously before continuing. The tests we have carried out in recent days confirm not only the effectiveness of the treatment, but also its safety. It is revolutionary. As the performance continued, Logan allowed his mind to wander to the conversation he had had with Harper the night before in his Upper East Side apartment. Why did you choose to work specifically for me? He had asked, pouring a glass of wine that she waved away. Initially, it was for Thorne's infrastructure, Harper admitted, sitting on the white leather couch. But when I found out about his condition in the medical files, I realized I had a unique opportunity to prove that the treatment worked. Using me as a guinea pig. Using someone who I knew would understand the importance of this discovery, she corrected softly. Logan, you built a pharmaceutical empire by focusing on treatments that actually make a difference in people's lives, not cosmetic medicines or reformulated versions of old drugs. Montgomery's voice brought him back to the present. What about the legal implications? Maxwell has no legal basis for any action, Logan interrupted. All the improvements were made here with our technology. Dr. Winters' original work was slated for destruction. There is no intellectual property infringement. The meeting lasted for another 2 hours, with heated discussions about patents, marketing, and pricing structure. In the end, even the most skeptical directors could not deny the revolutionary potential of the treatment. When he finally returned to his office, Logan found Harper sitting in her usual chair, typing quickly on her laptop as if it were a normal workday. They approved, he announced, closing the door. The board wants to begin clinical trials immediately. Harper let out a sigh of relief, her shoulders visibly relaxing. What about me? You will officially be transferred to the Research and Development Department, Logan replied, sitting on the edge of his desk. As project director. Logan, she started, but he held up his hand. I'm not done yet. You lied to me, Harper. You manipulated not just corporate documents, but my personal trust. I know, she whispered, lowering her eyes. But it also gave me something I had given up dreaming about, he continued, his voice softening. And I'm not just talking about the treatment. Harper looked up, meeting his eyes. The baby? The baby. The hope. The future. Logan walked over, crouching down beside her. But we need to establish some rules from now on. Complete honesty, no more secrets. No more secrets, she agreed, her hand unconsciously resting on her still flat belly. And we need to do this right, he continued. Dinner with me tonight? A real date this time, no lies or professional pretenses. A small smile appeared on her lips. Won't that complicate things even more? Probably, Logan admitted, allowing himself to smile as well. But some complications are worth it. The moment was interrupted by the phone, once again reminding them of the responsibilities that awaited them. While Harper answered with her usual efficiency, Logan watched the woman who had turned his world upside down, realizing that despite everything, he wouldn't change anything that had happened. Sometimes, he reflected, life's greatest gifts come disguised as seemingly insoluble problems. And sometimes, the most hurtful lies can pave the way for the most important truths. Le Bernardin restaurant glowed in soft candlelight as Logan and Harper were led to their private table on the mezzanine. The view of the main ballroom offered a spectacle of New York elegance, but Logan's thoughts were focused on the woman in front of him, who looked both familiar and strange in her navy blue dress. "You look different," he commented, after the sommelier left with the order of mineral water for her and a Bordeaux for him. "Without the efficient secretary uniform, you mean?" Harper smiled slightly. "It's strange being here as myself." "Dr. Harper Winters," Logan said the full name, testing how it sounded. "Harvard graduate, Ph.D. in molecular biotechnology. Impressive resume for someone who spent the last 2 years organizing my schedule." "You've been researching," she observed, without seeming surprised. "Extensively," he confirmed. "Including his messy departure from Maxwell, I found some interesting reports on the case." Harper visibly tensed. "And what else did you discover?" "That you weren't alone." Logan leaned forward. "Marcus Bennett, your mentor at Maxwell, also disappeared around the same time. Rumor had it that you two ran away with your research together." Harper's face paled slightly. "Marcus was like a father to me after I lost my parents. She hesitated, her hands clenching on the napkin. "He died trying to protect me." Logan felt the weight of that revelation. "What really happened, Harper?" "We discovered that Maxwell Management was manipulating research results," she began, her voice low but firm. "Not just the fertility project, but several others. Medicines were approved even with serious side effects. Data was altered to favor commercial results." "Why didn't they report it?" "We tried." A bitter smile crossed his lips. "Marcus gathered evidence for months, but the night we were going to turn everything over to the FDA, there was an accident in the lab." Dinner arrived, momentarily interrupting the conversation. Logan watched Harper absent-mindedly stir her plate of sea bass, lost in painful memories. "The fire," he added softly. "I read about it. 3 scientists died. Marcus made me promise to continue the work." Harper looked up, glistening with unshed tears. "He gave me the research backups and made me swear that I would find a way to complete the project. That was the last time I saw him alive." Logan reached across the table, touching her fingers gently. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "The less you knew, the safer you would be," she replied. "Maxwell has powerful connections, Logan, and now that we're about to announce the success of the treatment, do you think they'll come after you?" Wasn't a question. "Not just me." Harper instinctively placed her hand on her belly. "This baby is living proof that the treatment works. And with you personally involved in the project, I won't let anything happen to you," Logan declared firmly, his voice carrying a solemn promise. "You can't guarantee that," she countered softly. Maybe I should disappear again. It would be safer for everyone." "Don't even think about it." Logan's response was immediate and fierce. "Thorne has resources Maxwell couldn't dream of having. We can protect you, the research, and our son." The use of the word "our" made Harper look up in surprise. "Logan, listen." He leaned even closer, his voice low and intense. "For the past few days I've been struggling with conflicting feelings about you. Anger for the lie, gratitude for the miracle you performed, and something else. Something that started long before that night 3 weeks ago. I never planned on falling in love with you," Harper confessed. "It complicated everything. Or maybe I simplified it." Logan smiled slightly. "Because now I know exactly what I need to do." Before Harper could question, he made a discreet sign, and a Thorne security guard approached the table, handing him an envelope. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "Evidence," Logan replied, pushing the envelope toward him. "About what really happened at Maxwell, My investigation team has been working on it since I discovered your true identity. Harper opened the envelope with shaking hands, her eyes widening as she examined its contents. How did you get that? Let's just say Maxwell isn't the only one with powerful connections. He smiled, a predatory smile that was reminiscent of why he was one of the most feared CEOs in New York. And unlike them, I intend to use these connections to do the right thing. They're going to fight this, Harper warned, though his eyes sparkled with hope for the first time since he'd started talking about his past. Let them fight, Logan replied confidently. I'm ready for this battle. The question is, are you with me in this? Harper looked at the man in front of him, the powerful CEO who had become much more than his boss or the father of his child. She saw determination in his eyes, but also something deeper, something that made her heart race. I am, she replied simply, intertwining her fingers with his on the table. The future was still uncertain, with threats and challenges on the horizon. But in that moment, under the candlelight of Le Bernardin, two people who had built their lives on half-truths finally found their complete truth in each other. And this, perhaps, was the most revolutionary discovery of all. News of Thorne Pharmaceuticals' revolutionary fertility treatment was leaked to the press the morning after dinner at Le Bernardin. Logan watched from his office window as a small crowd of reporters gathered at the building's entrance. I just got 3 calls from the Wall Street Journal, Harper reported, entering the room with his tablet. She had swapped her formal blazers for a dark green dress that matched her eyes, taking on her new role as project director. They want an official statement about the treatment. What about Maxwell? Logan asked, turning to face her. Nothing public yet, but... She hesitated, biting her bottom lip. I got an email from Dr. Richard Hayes this morning, their new director of research. Logan walked over, taking the tablet from her hands to read the message. The words were polite and professional on the surface, but the veiled threat was clear. It would be a shame if information about certain irregularities in previous research came to light. They're bluffing, Logan declared, handing back the tablet. With the evidence we have gathered, any attempt by them to attack your credibility will only further expose their own crimes. It's not that simple, Harper sighed, sitting down in the leather armchair. Hayes has connections to the FDA. If he decides to question the legitimacy of our tests... I've thought about that, Logan interrupted, opening a folder on his desk. I have invited 3 of the country's most respected fertility experts to independently oversee our next phase of testing. Dr. Martinez is among them. Harper raised her eyebrows in surprise. Your personal doctor? He's monitored my condition for years, Logan explained. Its validation of the treatment will carry considerable weight. The phone on the desk rang, and the voice of Logan's new assistant came over the intercom. Mr. Thorne, Dr. Hayes from Maxwell Pharmaceuticals is here. No appointment required. Logan and Harper exchanged tense looks. Send him in, Logan replied, then lowered his voice to Harper. Do you want to go out? No, she replied firmly, standing up. We just talked about not running away. Dr. Richard Hayes was exactly as Harper remembered, tall, graying, and with that smile that never reached his cold eyes. He entered the room as if he owned the place, completely ignoring her presence. Mr. Thorne, he greeted, extending his hand. Thank you for having me without notice. Dr. Hayes, Logan shook his hand briefly. I confess that I am surprised by your visit. I came to make a friendly proposal. Hayes smiled, finally looking at Harper. Dr. Winters, how long? You look different. Pregnant tends to do that to a woman, she replied calmly, watching with satisfaction as his smile faltered slightly. So the rumors are true. Hayes turned to Logan. You are personally involved in the success of this treatment. Fascinating. If you've come to make veiled threats, Dr. Hayes, you can save us some time, Logan said, his voice carrying a clear warning. On the contrary, Hayes sat down uninvited. I came to offer a partnership. Maxwell has global distribution capabilities that Thorne doesn't yet have. We could take this treatment to international markets in half the time. In exchange for what? Harper asked, knowing his former employer's games all too well. Shared credit for the research, Hayes replied softly. And, of course, your return to our team, Dr. Winters, with a substantial promotion. Logan let out a humorless laugh. After they tried to kill her? That was a terrible accident, Hayes replied, his smile never wavering. And as for any past misunderstandings, we are willing to bury them. Permanently. Harper felt a familiar shiver of fear, remembering the last time he had heard similar words in the halls of Maxwell. But before she could respond, Logan moved, subtly placing himself between her and Hayes. I have a counter-proposal, he said, his voice dangerously soft. You will leave my office now, and we will forget that you tried to bribe a Thorn employee. In exchange, I will not send the entire dossier on Maxwell's activities over the last 5 years to the FBI. Hayes lost his smile for the first time. You are playing with forces you do not understand, Mr. Thorn. No, Dr. Hayes. Logan leaned across his desk. You're the one who doesn't understand. Thorn is not Maxwell. We don't buy silence or bury truths. And if you try anything against Harper or our research, you'll find out exactly what I'm capable of to protect what's mine. The silent confrontation between the two men lasted a few tense seconds before Hayes stood up, adjusting his impeccable suit. You have just declared war, Mr. Thorn. No, Harper interjected, his voice firm. You declared war 5 years ago when you chose profit over lives. We're just finally ready to fight back. After Hayes left, Logan turned to Harper, concern evident in his eyes. Are you well? No, she admitted, allowing herself to tremble slightly. But I will stay. We need to focus on what matters now. Logan pulled her into his arms, a rare display of affection in a professional environment. The treatment, the baby and his safety, these are our priorities. And us, Harper added softly, lifting her face to look at him. That's important too. We, he agreed, leaning down to kiss her softly. We will face this together. Outside the office, the approaching storm promised to be intense, but within those walls, two people who had found strength in each other were ready to face it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, both Logan and Harper had something truly worth fighting for, and this time, they were not alone in the battle. The boardroom at the Morrison and Bennett law firm in the heart of Manhattan exuded power and tradition through its mahogany-paneled walls. Logan watched the city skyline out the window as his legal team reviewed their strategy for taking on Maxwell Pharmaceuticals. We obtained a preventive injunction, announced Catherine Morrison, senior partner at the firm. If Maxwell tries anything against Dr. Winters or the research, they will face immediate legal consequences. Harper, sitting next to Logan, breathed a sigh of relief. In the 2 weeks since Hayes's visit, tensions had escalated considerably. Reporters followed her every move. Speculation about her past at Maxwell began to appear on specialized blogs, and she swore she had seen the same black car parked in front of her apartment for 3 nights in a row. What about the veiled threats? Logan asked, his hand unconsciously finding Harper's under the table. Documented and attached to the file, Catherine replied, adjusting her gold-rimmed glasses. But we need to discuss something more immediate, Dr. Winters' safety. Harper frowned. I already have security guards accompanying me. It's not enough, Logan interjected, especially after what happened yesterday. The incident from the previous day was still vivid in everyone's memory. Harper had found his laboratory ransacked, although nothing important had been taken. The security cameras mysteriously failed during the incident. I agree with Mr. Thorn, Catherine continued. We suggest you temporarily move to a safer location, preferably Mr. Thorn's penthouse on the Upper East Side. Harper sat up straighter. Doesn't that seem a little extreme? What seems extreme is risking your safety and that of our son out of pride, Logan replied, his voice tight with barely concealed concern. The mention of the baby made Harper instinctively touch her belly, now with a small bump visible. His last doctor's appointment had confirmed that everything was going well, but the stress of the last few weeks was starting to take its toll. "We also have to consider the impact on public opinion," added James Bennett, the other partner present. "If the press finds out about your relationship—" "We're not hiding anything," Logan interrupted firmly. "Harper isn't just the brilliant scientist who developed this treatment. She's the woman I'm—" He hesitated for a moment, looking at her. "The woman I love." The silence that followed his statement was broken by the soft sound of Harper holding her breath. It was the first time he had said those words out loud. "Still," Catherine resumed, giving the two a moment to compose themselves, "we need to manage how this information is released. I suggest an exclusive interview with someone trustworthy, someone who can tell the full story, including the true reasons why Dr. Winters left Maxwell." "Rachel Martinez of the New York Times," Harper suggested. "She's been investigating Maxwell for years. She was one of the few who questioned the official account of the fire." Logan nodded. "Arrange contact," he instructed his team. "But first, let's resolve the issue of your safety." After the meeting, as they walked to the private elevator, Harper finally voiced what was worrying her. "Living together is a big step." "Bigger than having a child together?" Logan asked with a slight smile. "You know what I mean," she sighed. "Everything is happening so fast. Sometimes I wonder if—" Logan interrupted her, pulling her to a more private corner of the hallway. "Do I regret it? Am I just doing this for the baby or for the research?" "The idea crossed my mind," she admitted. "Harper," he cupped her face in his hands, "you changed my life long before you gave me the chance to be a father. From day one, with your infuriating efficiency and brutal honesty, you made me want to be a better person, a better leader." Tears began to form in her eyes. "Logan, let me finish," he continued softly. "Yes, you lied about your past. Yes, you made questionable decisions, but every choice you made was with the thought of helping other people, of making a difference. How can I not love someone like that?" Harper moved closer, resting her forehead against his chest. "I'm afraid," she confessed in a whisper. "Not Hayes or Maxwell. I'm afraid of losing that. Of losing you." Logan hugged her tighter. "You won't lose, I promise." The moment was interrupted by Logan's cell phone, but he ignored it. Some things were more important than business. "Come live with me," he asked again. "Not for safety, not for the baby, because I want to wake up with you every morning, because I want to build a life with you." Harper looked up, a smile starting to form on her lips. "Are you sure it's not just because I'm a brilliant scientist that revolutionized your company?" "Well, that's definitely a bonus," he teased, leaning in to kiss her. The kiss was interrupted by the arrival of the elevator. As they went downstairs, where another horde of reporters was probably waiting for them, Harper realized that, for the first time since leaving Maxwell, she no longer felt alone in her struggle. And maybe, she thought as she watched Logan's determined profile, some battles were worth fighting not just for justice but for love. The front page of that morning's New York Times featured a photo of Logan and Harper leaving the law firm of Morrison and Bennett. The headline was straightforward: "From Scandal to Redemption, the true story behind Thorne Pharmaceuticals' revolutionary treatment." Rachel Martinez had done an exceptional job on the report. The story began with the Maxwell fire, detailing how Harper and his mentor had uncovered data manipulations that put lives at risk. The journalist had obtained statements from former employees that corroborated Harper's version, including a nurse who had witnessed changes to patient records. "You should be resting," Logan commented, finding Harper in her new penthouse office, surrounded by newspapers and tablets displaying different reports on the story. "How can I rest? The internet is exploding," she replied, absent-mindedly running her hand over the small bulge on her stomach. "The FDA just announced a formal investigation into Maxwell." Logan moved closer, gently massaging her tense shoulders. "That's good. It means Hayes won't be able to use his connections to harm us." "But the comments about us—" Harper hesitated, showing a gossip site that speculated about their relationship. Theories ranged from gold digger to corporate conspiracy. "Let them talk," Logan said firmly. "The people who matter know the truth." The intercom rang, announcing Dr. Martinez's arrival for Harper's monthly appointment. Since she had moved into the penthouse the week before, Logan had insisted on having her appointments at home, minimizing her public exposure. "How is my favorite patient?" "Doctor," Martinez asked after the initial greetings, preparing the portable ultrasound equipment. "Anxious," Harper admitted, lying down on the couch. "The nausea has subsided, but with this whole situation, stress is not good for the baby," the doctor warned gently, applying the gel to her belly. "You need to find ways to relax." Logan held Harper's hand as they watched the ultrasound screen. The sound of heartbeats filled the room, strong and rhythmic. "Everything is perfectly normal," Dr. Martinez smiled. "Do you want to know the sex?" The couple exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed this yet, too involved with the crisis in the company. "Yes," they responded in unison, making the doctor laugh. "Congratulations, you're having a girl." Harper felt tears escape her eyes. A girl. A little life that carried not only their DNA, but also living proof that their work, their struggles, had not been in vain. "A girl," Logan repeated softly, kissing Harper's forehead. Her tone revealed an emotion that few other than her had ever witnessed. After the doctor left, they remained hugged on the sofa, looking at the ultrasound images. "We need to think of names," Harper commented, cuddled in Logan's arms. "How about Phoenix?" he suggested with a half smile. Harper laughed, lightly slapping his arm. "No way. Our daughter is not going to be named after a research project." "Grace," Logan said after a moment. "It was my grandmother's name. She taught me that strength does not mean the absence of kindness." Harper turned to face him. "Grace Thorne. Sounds perfect." The moment was interrupted by Logan's cell phone. It was Catherine Morrison. "We have a problem," the lawyer said without preamble. "Hayes is calling a press conference for this afternoon. Our sources say he has something big." Logan exchanged worried looks with Harper. "How long do we have?" 3 hours. I'm already mobilizing the team." After hanging up, Logan began pacing the room, his mind working quickly. What could he have? Harper bit her lip thoughtfully. On the night of the fire, there were other documents besides fertility research. Marcus was investigating other departments at Maxwell. What kind of documents? I don't know for sure. Marcus said it was better if I didn't know all the details for my own protection. But she hesitated, getting up to grab her laptop. He left something with me. An encrypted file that I've never been able to open. Logan immediately called his IT team. In less than an hour, Thorne's top cryptography expert was working on the file. It's an old-fashioned encryption system, the technician explained, mainly used in government documents from the 1990s. Marcus worked for the government before Maxwell, Harper commented, watching the technician work. He mentioned something about military research. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the file opened. The contents made Harper gasp. "My God," she whispered. "Hayes isn't planning on attacking me. He's going to expose Maxwell's entire illegal testing scheme on war veterans." Logan quickly looked through the documents. "This will destroy the entire company, including innocent people who work there. And he's going to use me as a scapegoat," Harper concluded. "They're going to say that I stole these documents along with the fertility research, trying to blackmail the company." Logan was already on the phone with Catherine. "Cancel any appointments. Get the legal and PR team together immediately, and contact Rachel Martinez. We have an even bigger story for her." As she watched Logan mobilize his resources, Harper felt Grace move for the first time. A small movement, like a butterfly fluttering its wings, reminding her of what really mattered. "Let's end this once and for all," she said, determined. "Not just for us or Grace, but for all the people Maxwell has harmed." Logan stopped his calls for a moment, moving closer to kiss her. Together, he promised. The approaching storm would be intense, but they were ready to face it, and this time, the truth was on his side. The Maxwell Pharmaceuticals press conference was scheduled to begin in less than an hour when Logan and Harper arrived at Thorne headquarters. The lobby was buzzing with the presence of journalists who, upon seeing them, immediately raised cameras and microphones. "Mr. Thorne, what is your response to the industrial espionage accusations? Dr. Winters, is it true that you stole secret research? Did your relationship start before or after the research theft?" Logan led Harper through the crowd with a protective arm around her, while security guards kept reporters away. In the private elevator, Harper finally let out the breath he had been holding. "They already know," she murmured, leaning against the mirrored wall. "Hayes must have leaked something to the press." "Exactly as we predicted," Logan replied, checking his phone. "Rachel is in position. Catherine has the injunction in hand. Everything is ready." In the conference room on the top floor, the team was already gathered. Monitors displayed different news channels, all focused on Maxwell's headquarters, where an even larger crowd of reporters had gathered. "We've got 2 more former employees willing to testify," James Bennett reported, passing a folder to Logan. One of them worked directly on veteran testing. Harper looked through the statements, his face paling as he read the details. They used soldiers with PTSD as guinea pigs for experimental medications, without informed consent. "And now Hayes is going to try to throw all of this behind your back," Logan added, his voice filled with contained anger. "But we have something he doesn't expect." Catherine Morrison entered the room at that moment, her heels echoing on the marble floor. "The judge just signed it. We are authorized to intervene in the press conference if Hayes tries to defame Dr. Winters." "It won't be necessary," Harper said, surprising everyone. "I'm going there." "No way," Logan protested immediately. "It's exactly what Hayes wants." "Yes, it is," she agreed, standing up. "He wants to see me cornered, desperate. He wants me to look guilty. But what if instead I face everything head on?" The room fell silent as Harper walked to the window, one hand instinctively resting on her slightly protruding belly. Marcus died trying to expose the truth. Those veterans, they deserve justice. I can't hide while Hayes tries to bury this all again. Logan approached her, gently turning her to face him. "It's dangerous." "My whole life has been dangerous since I discovered those files," she smiled sadly. "But now I have something really worth fighting for. A family." The moment was interrupted by a commotion on the monitors. Hayes was taking the stage at Maxwell headquarters, his confident smile illuminated by camera flashes. "Let's do this right then," Logan decided, pulling out his phone. "Rachel, change of plans. Dr. Winters is making a surprise appearance at the press conference. Be ready." The next 30 minutes were a whirlwind of activity. As the legal team finalized the final details, Harper prepared to face her past head-on. "Are you sure about this?" Logan asked one last time as Thorne's armored car drove them through Manhattan traffic. Harper intertwined her fingers with his. "For the first time in a long time, I know something for sure. Grace deserves to grow up knowing that her parents fought for the truth, no matter the cost." When they arrived at Maxwell headquarters, Hayes was in the middle of his carefully rehearsed speech, painting a picture of corporate betrayal and intellectual property theft. "And it is with regret that we reveal that Dr. Winters not only stole confidential research, but also—" "Why don't you tell the full truth, Richard?" Harper's voice, amplified by the microphone Rachel had discreetly handed her, cut through the air like a blade. The crowd of reporters turned as one organism, cameras focusing on the pregnant figure walking calmly down the center aisle. Hayes paled visibly. "Dr. Winters, this is a private conference." "Nothing about this is private," Harper replied, her voice steady as she took the stage. "Especially not the documents about the illegal testing on war veterans, or should I say your non-voluntary human guinea pigs?" The press buzz increased considerably. Flash after flash captured the surreal scene. The pregnant scientist facing off against the powerful pharmaceutical executive. "These are serious and unfounded accusations." Hayes tried to regain control, but his voice shook slightly. "As baseless as the fire that killed Marcus Bennett?" Harper asked, his green eyes shining with determination. "I have all the documents, Richard. All the reports, all the tests, all the names. And unlike you, I'm not afraid of the truth." It was at that moment that Logan, accompanied by Catherine Morrison and a team of lawyers, entered the auditorium. The moment had arrived. The truth, buried for so long, would finally come to light, and this time, no one could stop her. The auditorium at Maxwell Pharmaceuticals fell into a stunned silence as Harper stood firm on the stage, facing Richard Hayes. Logan watched from the sidelines, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of danger, while Catherine Morrison discreetly filmed the entire scene with her cell phone. "Do you want the real story?" Harper asked the journalists present, his voice clear and firm. "Not the manipulated version that Maxwell prepared, but the truth about how one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country betrayed the trust of hundreds of war veterans." Hayes stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Securities," he called, but Catherine quickly held up a document. "I wouldn't do that," the lawyer warned. "We have a court injunction allowing Dr. Winters to speak. Any attempt to silence her will be considered obstruction of justice." Rachel Martinez, strategically positioned in the front row, began broadcasting live on the New York Times online channel. Harper's words echoed through the auditorium as she detailed the unauthorized experiments, data falsifications, and deaths that were covered up. "Marcus Bennett figured all this out," she continued, her voice shaking slightly at the mention of her former mentor. "He kept detailed records, including video statements from affected veterans. The night we planned to turn everything over to the FDA, the accident happened." Logan noticed Hayes beginning to sweat, his eyes darting nervously over the crowd of reporters absorbing every word. "But you didn't count on one thing, Richard." Harper turned to face him directly. "Marcus was smarter than all of us. He not only made backups of the fertility research, but he also distributed the evidence of the illegal experiments to trusted people. People who kept everything safe until the time was right." At that moment, the auditorium doors opened again. A group of men in military uniforms entered, led by a high-ranking officer. Logan recognized Colonel James Patterson, one of the veterans who had agreed to testify. "My name is Colonel Patterson," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of his authority. "And I can confirm every word Dr. Winters is saying. I was one of Maxwell's non-volunteer test subjects." Chaos ensued in the auditorium. Journalists stood up, cameras flashed, questions were shouted from all directions. Hayes attempted to leave the stage, but 2 federal agents blocked his exit. "Richard Hayes," one of the agents announced, "you are in custody for questioning regarding charges of fraud, illegal human experimentation, and obstruction of justice." Harper felt her legs weaken, the adrenaline starting to wear off. Logan was at her side in seconds, discreetly supporting her. "You did it," he whispered in her ear. He finished. But it wasn't over. Not completely. In the days that followed, the story dominated national headlines. Former Maxwell employees began speaking out, revealing layers upon layers of corruption and negligence. The FDA launched a full investigation, and the Department of Defense demanded a congressional hearing. A week after the press conference, Logan and Harper were in their penthouse apartment, watching coverage of the latest arrests at Maxwell. "The company's stock has tanked," Logan commented, turning off the TV. "The council is in a panic, looking for a buyer to salvage what's left." Harper, curled up on the couch with a cup of chamomile tea, looked up. "You're thinking about making an offer, aren't you?" "It would be ironic," he smiled slightly. "Thorne taking over Maxwell, turning it into something that actually helps people rather than hurts them. On the condition that the innocent employees keep their jobs," Harper added. Naturally, Logan sat next to her, resting his hand on her belly to feel Grace's now frequent movements. "But that can wait. Now we need to focus on more important things." "Like the baby shower your mom insists on organizing?" Harper joked, although they both knew there was tension in her voice. She hadn't officially met Logan's family yet. "She'll love you," Logan assured, kissing her forehead, "especially after I learned that you not only gave me a granddaughter, but also saved hundreds of lives by exposing Maxwell." Harper snuggled closer to him, finally allowing herself to completely relax for the first time in years. The weight of secrets, of constant fear had been lifted from his shoulders. Now she could truly look to the future. "We need to start preparing the baby's room," she murmured sleepily. "I've already hired the best decorators in town," Logan replied. "But first, how about a weekend at our house in the Hamptons? Just the two of us, before the madness of the Maxwell lawsuit enters its most intense phase." Harper smiled, already imagining peaceful days by the sea, away from courts and headlines. "It looks perfect." The sun was beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. From the rooftop, the city appeared peaceful, oblivious to the dramas and revelations of recent weeks. Logan watched as Harper began to fall asleep in his arms, marveling at how life could change so drastically in such a short amount of time. A secretary who wasn't just a secretary, a treatment that wasn't just a treatment, and a love that had been born among lies and secrets, but now, finally free from the shadow of the past, could fully blossom in the light of truth. The late afternoon sun bathed the Thorns Hamptons beach house in golden hues when Harper awoke from a nap on the deck. The gentle sound of the waves and the sea breeze had finally managed to relax her after weeks of constant tension. "I thought you might like some tea," Logan said, approaching with 2 steaming cups. He had swapped his usual Italian suits for linen pants and a light shirt, looking younger and more relaxed. "Did your mom call again?" Harper asked, accepting the cup and watching as he sat down in the lounge chair next to him. "3 times in the last 2 hours, he confirmed with a half smile. "She's determined to meet you before the baby shower. In fact, she's on her way." Harper almost dropped his cup. "What do you mean, on the way?" "Apparently, my dear mother decided she couldn't wait any longer to meet the woman who, according to her, saved her son from perpetual loneliness and will still give her a granddaughter," Logan quoted, imitating his mother's refined accent. "Logan!" Harper stood up abruptly, going into panic mode. "You could have warned me before. I need to change, do my hair." He gently held her by the shoulders. "Harper, breathe. My mother will adore you exactly as you are. In fact, she already adores you just because of what she read in the papers about how you stood up to Maxwell. The papers also talked about how I lied about my identity and infiltrated your company," Harper recalled, biting her lip. "And about how you did it to save lives and expose a corrupt corporation," Logan finished, pulling her into his arms. "Plus, you're carrying your first granddaughter. For Eleanor Thorne, that practically makes you a saint." As if summoned by the mention of his name, a silver Bentley appeared at the property's entrance. Harper felt her heart quicken as she watched an elegant woman in her 60s emerge from the car, her gray hair perfectly styled and her posture impeccable. "Logan, darling!" Eleanor Thorne exclaimed, hugging her son before turning to Harper with a warm smile. "And you must be the famous Dr. Winters, or would you prefer me to call you Harper?" "Harper, please, Mrs. Thorne," she replied nervously. "Then you must call me Eleanor," the older woman declared, surprising Harper with an affectionate hug. "Now, tell me all about my granddaughter. Did Logan mention that you guys chose the name Grace?" The next few hours passed in a surreal haze. Eleanor Thorne proved to be surprisingly pleasant company, sharing embarrassing stories about Logan's childhood and offering advice about pregnancy and motherhood. "You know," Eleanor commented over dinner on the porch, "when Margaret left Logan because of infertility, I thought he would never open up to anyone again." Harper glanced discreetly at Logan, who had gone to the wine cellar for more wine. "He doesn't talk much about the divorce." "Because he blamed himself for years," Eleanor sighed, as if her medical condition was some kind of character flaw. Margaret didn't help matters, of course, by making a point of having a child with her new husband less than a year later. "That must have been devastating for him," Harper murmured, her heart aching as she imagined Logan facing that pain alone. "It was," Eleanor agreed, then smiled softly. "But then you showed up, with your secrets and your revolutionary science. Yes, but most of all with your brave heart and your determination to make a difference. Even though I lied to him? Dear," Eleanor reached for her hand across the table. Sometimes the greatest truths come from the most necessary lies. What matters is that when it came time to face those lies, you chose the truth, no matter the personal cost. Logan returned at that moment, finding the two most important women in his life with tears in their eyes. "Is everything okay here?" "Perfectly fine," Eleanor replied, winking at Harper. "We were just discussing the baby shower. We thought about having it in the garden of the mansion in Greenwich. What do you think?" As mother and son discussed details of the event, Harper felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Here, in this house by the sea with the sound of waves in the background and the warmth of family acceptance, she finally felt like she had found her place. Grace moved in her belly, as if in agreement, and Harper smiled, resting her hand on the spot where her daughter rested. The future still held challenges: the lawsuit against Maxwell, adapting to public life as part of the Thorne family, her new role at the company. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face them. Because now she had something that neither Marcus nor Maxwell could give her: a family. A true family, built not just on blood ties, but on choices, forgiveness, and unconditional love. And that, she thought as she watched Logan laugh at something his mother said, was worth more than all the revolutionary research in the world. The baby shower at the Thorne mansion in Greenwich was scheduled for that Saturday afternoon, but the New York weather seemed to have other plans. Dark clouds hovered over the property as Harper watched the decorators finalize arrangements in the covered garden, transforming the space into a magazine-worthy setting. "We can move everything inside if it starts to rain," Eleanor commented, appearing at Harper's side with a clipboard in hand. Over the past few weeks, the Thorne matriarch had become a constant, comforting presence in her life. "The weather seems to reflect the mood at the company," Harper sighed, checking her phone once again. The news about Maxwell kept coming. "Is Logan still at the council meeting?" Eleanor asked, even though she already knew the answer. His son had spent the last few days in intense negotiations about the possible acquisition of Maxwell. "Yes, but you promised you won't be late for—" Harper was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine Morrison, who seemed more agitated than usual. "We need to talk," the lawyer said without preamble. "In private?" Eleanor discreetly walked away, leaving the two women alone in the mansion's office. Catherine waited for the door to close before continuing. "Margaret is back," she announced, closely watching Harper's reaction. "Logan's ex-wife?" Harper felt her heart race. "Why?" "She's questioning the validity of the treatment," Catherine explained, handing a folder to Harper. "He claims that, as it was developed during his marriage to Logan, he has intellectual property rights." Harper flipped through the documents, her irritation growing with each page. "That's ridiculous. She didn't even know the Phoenix Project existed when they were married." "It's a desperate move," Catherine agreed, "probably orchestrated by Maxwell's lawyers. They are trying every tactic possible to discredit the treatment." Thunder sounded in the distance, making the mansion's windows vibrate slightly. Harper walked to the window, watching the first drops of rain fall onto the garden. "Does Logan know?" she asked, although she already imagined the answer. "It's being reported now, at the board meeting," Catherine replied. "I wanted to warn you first because—" She hesitated. "Because Margaret will be at the baby shower," Harper added, turning to face the lawyer. "She got an invite somehow." Catherine nodded. Through old friends in common with Eleanor, it would be a bigger scandal to stop her from coming. Harper sat heavily in a leather armchair, feeling Grace shift restlessly in her belly. It was as if her daughter could feel her agitation. "I'm not going to let her ruin this day," Harper declared after a moment. "Nor the treatment that can help so many people." "Logan said you would react like that." Catherine smiled slightly. "He also said to remind you that you've faced far worse than a bitter ex-wife." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Logan appeared in the office doorway, his face tense but determined. "The meeting ended early when we found out about Margaret," he explained, crossing the room to stand next to Harper. "Are you well?" "I am," she replied, allowing him to help her up. "But I think we need a plan." We already have one, Catherine interjected. In fact, Margaret's presence may be just what we need to put an end to Maxwell's attempts to discredit the treatment once and for all. Logan raised an eyebrow. Like this? Think about it, the lawyer continued. What better time to publicly demonstrate unanimous support for Harper's work than at a social event full of influential people, including the ex-wife who tried to use your infertility against you? Harper began to understand the plan. A public display of family unity. Exactly, Catherine smiled. And I'm sure Eleanor is already 2 steps ahead of us in that regard. As if to confirm his words, Eleanor reappeared in the office, her eyes shining with that look that Logan knew well from his childhood. Guests will begin arriving in an hour, she announced. And I just had a very interesting conversation with some people who might be able to help put Margaret in her place. Logan hugged Harper from behind, his hands resting protectively on her stomach. Are you sure you want to face this today? Harper covered his hands with hers, feeling Grace move under his touch. I do. Besides, she smiled, turning her face to face him. We've already faced down corrupt scientists and evil corporations. What's an ex-wife compared to that? The rain finally began to fall in force, but inside the Thorne mansion, a family was preparing to weather another storm together, and this time, Harper knew exactly where her shelter was. The main hall of the Thorne mansion was filled with guests when Margaret Reynolds, formerly Margaret Thorne, made her measured entrance. Harper watched her from across the room, noting how Logan's ex-wife still maintained that aura of studied sophistication that perfectly matched her impeccable channel. She's always had a perfect sense of dramatic timing, Eleanor murmured beside Harper, offering her a glass of lemon water. But today it's your show, honey. Harper unconsciously adjusted the navy silk dress Eleanor had insisted she wear, her hands resting protectively on her 7-month-old belly. Grace, as if sensing the tension of the moment, gave a particularly strong kick. Harper! Margaret approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You look radiant. Pregnancy clearly works for you. Margaret, Harper replied calmly, noticing how the other woman's eyes lingered on her belly. What a surprise to have you here. Oh, I wouldn't miss it for anything, Margaret replied, her tone falsely sweet. After all, it's not every day that an administrative assistant manages to not only impregnate her supposedly sterile boss, but also claim authorship of revolutionary research. The silence that followed was tense, but Harper maintained his composure. Years of facing down corporate executives had taught him the value of self-control. Dr. Winters, a familiar voice called, and Harper saw Dr. Martinez approaching with a group of renowned doctors. We were just discussing the preliminary results of the clinical trials. Is it true that the success rate is above 90%? Harper realized the strategy immediately. Eleanor had perfectly orchestrated the moment. Yes, doctor. In fact, we just received approval to expand testing to 5 more medical centers. Margaret watched the interaction with increasing unease as more people joined the conversation, all clearly impressed by Harper's technical knowledge. It's fascinating how you were able to modify the original formula to eliminate the side effects, commented a Johns Hopkins researcher. Especially considering it took years for the original team to even identify the problem. Well, I had access to exceptional resources at Thorne, Harper replied diplomatically, noticing Logan approaching out of the corner of his eye, and a brilliant mind to harness them, Logan added, positioning himself next to Harper and placing a protective arm around her waist. Margaret, what a surprise. Logan, Margaret greeted coldly, I see you've handled our situation well. Actually, Logan smiled, but his eyes were serious. I must thank you, Margaret. If you hadn't left me because of my condition, I would never have met the extraordinary woman who not only found a cure, but showed me the true meaning of family. Harper felt her eyes fill with tears. Damn pregnancy hormones, as the surrounding guests smiled approvingly. Margaret seemed to have swallowed something particularly bitter. Speaking of family, Eleanor interjected softly. I think it's time for the special announcement, don't you? Logan nodded, getting everyone's attention with a light clink on his glass. First, I would like to thank each of you for attending this celebration. As many of you know, the last few months have been interesting for Thorne Pharmaceuticals. A wave of polite laughter rippled through the room. Interesting was an understatement considering the recent scandals and revelations. But today we're not just here to celebrate Grace's imminent arrival, Logan continued, his eyes meeting Harper's. We are here to announce that Dr. Harper Winters has agreed to not only lead our new biomedical research division, but, he paused dramatically, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket, has agreed to officially become a Thorne. The room erupted in applause as Logan knelt before Harper, who alternated between laughing and crying. Margaret discreetly left the room, but no one seemed to notice her departure. Did you plan this all? Harper whispered as Logan slipped the diamond ring onto her finger. Actually, it was my mother's idea, he confessed quietly. She said there was no better time to show the world that you are so much more than the scientist who revolutionized Thorne. You are the heart of this family. Grace chose this moment to deliver another powerful kick, making Harper laugh through tears. I think she approves. The celebration continued into the night, with Harper receiving not only congratulations on her engagement, but also professional recognition from some of the biggest names in medicine. Catherine Morrison discreetly reported that Margaret had officially withdrawn her question about the treatment's intellectual property. Apparently, the lawyer smiled, she decided that a public clash with the future Mrs. Thorne would not be good for her social image. Later, as the last guests were leaving and the rain finally let up, Harper found a moment of stillness in the covered garden. The air was clear after the storm, carrying the scent of wet flowers. I thought I'd find you here, Logan said softly, approaching her from behind and wrapping her in his arms. Do you regret accepting to officially join the most dramatic family in New York? Harper smiled, leaning back against him. Never. Although I think Grace will inherit this gift for drama. She hasn't stopped moving all night. Like the mother, like the daughter, Logan teased, kissing her neck. Always ready to shake things up. And under the lightning sky, with the comforting weight of the ring on her finger and her daughter dancing in her womb, Harper realized that all the lies, all the secrets, and all the battles had been worth it. Because sometimes, it takes a storm to clear the way for something extraordinarily beautiful. Autumn painted Central Park with golden hues when Harper woke up on the Upper East Side penthouse, feeling the first rays of sunlight touch her face. Beside him, Logan was still sleeping soundly, a rare sight for a man who normally started his days before dawn. The gentle movement in her belly made her smile. Grace had been particularly active the last few weeks, as if sensing her arrival was near. There were just 2 weeks left until the due date, and the baby's room was already ready, decorated in soft tones of green and gold. Harper slipped silently out of bed, walking to the balcony that offered a spectacular view of the city. So much had changed since that morning, almost 9 months ago, when she had revealed her impossible pregnancy to Logan. Thorne Pharmaceuticals had completely transformed itself. The Maxwell acquisition was nearly complete, and the fertility treatment was on the verge of receiving final FDA approval. You should be resting. Logan's sleepy voice reached her, moments before his arms wrapped around her from behind. Grace won't let me, she replied, leaning back against him. I think she inherited your obsession with productivity, or your determination to change the world, he countered, his hands resting on his prominent belly. Catherine called last night, after you fell asleep. The last legal hurdle has been cleared. Maxwell has officially recognized the legitimacy of the research. Harper felt a weight leave her shoulders. So it's over? It's really over? Well, we still have the wedding next month to survive, Logan joked, referring to the elaborate celebration that Eleanor had insisted on planning, even with Harper still recovering from giving birth at the time. Your mom is unstoppable, Harper laughed, turning in his arms. Yesterday she brought in 3 different feng shui experts to make sure Grace's room has the best vibes possible. Logan was about to respond when Harper's phone rang. It was Rachel Martinez. Dr. Winters, the journalist began, her voice thick with emotion. "I just got the news. The Pulitzer, the series of reports on Maxwell won." Harper felt her legs give out, and Logan gently guided her to a chair on the porch. "Rachel, this is extraordinary." "It's your credit too," Rachel insisted. "Your courage in exposing the truth, in standing up to Hayes, it changed lives. We have received over 200 letters from veterans and their families." After hanging up, Harper found Logan watching her with that look that still made her heart race. "What?" she asked. "I was thinking about how you turned a necessary lie into so many important truths," he replied, kneeling beside you. "And how incredibly lucky I am that you chose my company to infiltrate." Harper laughed through her tears. The pregnancy hormones were still making her emotional. "Technically, I chose you. I knew I needed someone who understood the importance of the treatment, not just its commercial potential." "What now?" Logan asked softly. "With all the lies revealed and all the battles won, what next?" "Now," Harper smiled, taking his hand and placing it over a specific spot where Grace was kicking, "comes the greatest adventure of all, being parents, building a family, continuing to make a difference, but this time, no secrets between us." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the private elevator, bringing Eleanor with what appeared to be a small entourage of decorators. "Oh, I'm glad you're awake," she exclaimed, moving forward with her characteristic energy. "We need to finalize the details of the nursery, and then we have the final fitting of your wedding dress, Harper dear. Even with the adjustments to accommodate the baby bump, it will look stunning." Logan and Harper exchanged amused glances. Some battles just weren't worth fighting, especially when they involved Eleanor Thorne in planning mode. Later that day, after Eleanor had finally left and the penthouse had returned to its usual calm, Harper found Logan in his office, reviewing the latest Maxwell acquisition documents. "I thought of something," she said, sitting down in the chair she used to occupy when she was his secretary. "What if we used part of the profits from the treatment to create a foundation, to help couples who can't afford the procedure?" Logan looked up from the documents, smiling. "Are you already thinking about your next project to change the world?" "Always," she replied with a mischievous smile. "It's part of my charm, isn't it?" "It's part of the reason I fell in love with you," he agreed, standing up to kiss her. "And yes, I think it's an excellent idea. We can start working on it as soon as Grace gives us a break." As if on cue, Grace threw a particularly hard kick, making Harper laugh. I think she approves too. The sun was beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. From the Upper East Side penthouse, Harper could see the city preparing for the night, thousands of lives taking their courses, each with their own truths and secrets. But there, in that moment, with Logan by her side and Grace moving in her womb, she knew she had found her most important truth. Sometimes the truest love is born from the most necessary lies, and the greatest miracles can come from the best-kept secrets. It was a new beginning, not just for them as a family, but for everyone who would be helped by the treatment that grew out of their courage to face the truth. And this time, there was nothing left to hide.